Hey Mike, thanks for the video reply. Glad I could inspire you to start posting videos on YouTube. I hope that you'll continue to post more, either in response to anything I say or just anything else that's on your mind. I'd love to hear what you have to say. But let's give a quick recap of the discussion so far. You're replying to a response video that I made to Agman, and in his original video, Agman said that we don't really choose what we believe. Our beliefs are sort of just foisted onto us against our will. My video challenged this idea, claiming that we actually do have a lot of choice over what we believe. I compared belief to breathing. Most of the time we do it unconsciously, but at any given time, if we choose, we can exercise our will over what we believe and control it to a certain extent. In your response video, and I advise everyone to check out his response to give the full presentation of Mike's thoughts, you make the point that there's a bit of a tension here with regards to my video, Why You Don't Believe in Heaven. In that video, I suggested that what people think they believe and what they actually believe are at least sometimes two separate things. But if we can choose our beliefs, then why should this be? Why don't people just choose to believe what they think they believe? This is an astute observation on your part, Mike, but I actually don't think that there really is a tension here. That was a long video, it was almost a half hour long, but there was a part in there where I did say, you know, if you really want to, when faced with the argument that I laid out, you can choose to stop believing that death is a bad thing. And some people have done this. But as I said in that video, though, I think that would be a really bad idea. I don't think most people would be willing to do that. Most people would be willing to give up on the idea that death is bad and that we should grieve when loved ones die. Because if they do that, all sorts of other horrible things seem to follow, including most of morality and ethics going out the window. So I think actually I am consistent in both of those videos. It's just that I made a small argument in there that if you do choose to believe that grief is irrational and that death is not a bad thing, it's going to come at a very high cost to you. Now to the 3 points that you make in the sidebar explicitly, the 3 particular criticisms that you make. The first one is choice enters belief meaningfully only that we choose our methodologies, not our conclusions. I think that you're at least partially right in this regard. Much of the time when we're making choices, we are choosing methodologies. But the first response to that thought is, well, if we can cherry pick our methodologies precisely to get the conclusions that we want. That's exactly what Kurt Wise did in as I mentioned in the previous video. He decided to choose a methodology that would give him precisely the conclusion that he wanted. So the fact that we can choose a methodology to get to just about any conclusion that you want kind of seems to me to make this sort of a moot point. Maybe it's worth focusing on simply because, as we choose our methodologies, we're not just going to get the one conclusion that we want. We're going to get a whole bunch of other conclusions that we may or may not want as well. But by and large, it seems to me this is just a subtle clarification rather than an out-and-out contradiction. But one other response to that point, I actually do think that in some occasions at least, and granted these are pretty rare probably, but in some occasions we actually can choose our conclusions. And that's simply because people are masters at self-deception. They're masters at deluding themselves and getting themselves to accept something, even though what they accept is completely flies in the face of their standard methodologies for belief. And they just hold on to that. Maybe I oversold it. Maybe it's actually not that rare. Maybe we do this all the time. But at any rate, I think we definitely do it at least sometimes. So on at least some occasions, I think that we do in fact choose precisely our conclusions and not just our methodologies. We probably have to engage in some sort of self-deception or something like that if that conclusion is at odds with our general methodologies. But I do think it does happen. Next up, your point about unconscious choices. You say unconscious choices are not choices because will is not involved. We are therefore not responsible for them insofar as we are unaware of them. I think you are slightly misconstruing what I was saying here. I didn't mean to suggest that when we choose to believe we're making unconscious choices. I did say that much of the time our belief is unconscious. Much of the time we don't sort of reflect and think and will about what it is that we that we're going to believe, or what it is that we're going to choose. So it's not a gross distortion or anything like that, but it's not quite the wording that I would use. But to the substance of the point, I do think that, at least in principle, the idea of an unconscious choice does make perfect sense. I think we make unconscious choices all the time. A lot of, like, for example, the facial gestures or the hand gestures that I'm doing as I make this video, I'm not stopping and reflecting about them. In that sense, they're unconscious. But at the same time, I am responsible for them. I am the one doing them. And if I stop and think about it, I can modify them and change them. So the fact that I have control over them is what matters in this context, not simply the fact that it's conscious or unconscious. Now, granted, this is pretty complicated, and exactly how much moral responsibility I have in virtue of the fact that I have control versus the fact that, well, in this given moment it's unconscious as opposed to conscious, that's a really complicated issue about psychology and moral psychology and ethics and so forth. I don't want to wade too much into that very complicated sea of ideas, but suffice to say, to simply say that because we're not conscious of them, therefore we're not responsible of them, I think gives us way too much slack. It opens up the door for way too many excuses. So there has to be room made. I think probably the best word for this is the semi-voluntary choices. Again, much like breathing. Most of the time, we're not conscious of the fact that we're breathing. We're not thinking about it. But that doesn't mean we don't have control over it, and that doesn't mean that, and to an extent at least, we are responsible for it. Okay, your third and final point about you say decisions to believe with regard to propositions, not methodologies, are really decisions to try to coerce ourselves into belief. I think the tricky word there that catches me is coerce. I'm not quite sure if that's necessarily the right word. Maybe in certain contexts that's right, but certainly at least something like that. When we decide to believe given propositions, we're trying to somehow force ourselves or convince ourselves, make us believe what we really want to believe. And I think that's probably right. That sounds pretty accurate to me. I'm not quite sure exactly if this is an objection or a problem to what I've said. I think that for the core point that I was arguing, at the end of the day, all that matters is that we have this capacity to control ourselves, to control what we believe. Whether we get there by coercion or some other method, some other way of bringing ourselves to believe what we want to believe, at the end of the day, still all that matters is that we are in control and we can, again, given certain constraints, make ourselves believe what we choose to believe. So I hope this was a thorough and fair response to your video. Again, I really appreciate the response, and I appreciate you making me come back to this one. It had been a while since I made this video. Once more, thanks a lot. Please feel free to get back to me with your thoughts, and maybe this dialogue can continue further. Anyway, take care.